I like to paint dolls, and today I'm going to be 3D printing and painting Kara Zor-El the way she's supposed to look. And as an extra special bonus, I'm going to spend a little time yelling at the designers of this piece for making it about 10 times more difficult than it needed to be.
I like to paint dolls.
I traveled to Richmond, Virginia on the 26th of June to see the Supergirl movie the day that it opened with my nephew. My nephew and I have a special bond, which is anything and everything Kryptonian. So I didn't want to show up to this special occasion empty-handed. I decided to do this Supergirl model for him, and he is a big fan of the Woman of Tomorrow comic book. This is a perfect representation of the cover of that comic book, and so it was a perfect idea for a gift for him. And while I was at it, I decided to make one for myself too. I purchased the STL for this model off of CG Trader. The designer is LA3 Design or LA3D eSign. I don't know what the hell their name is, but this is a beautiful model. Like I said, it's a perfect representation of the cover of Woman of Tomorrow, but it has a flaw on it that, if I'm being honest, if I saw the flaw prior to purchasing the STL, I probably wouldn't have bought it. But it's one of those things that you don't know until you get it and you download it and you start messing with it in the slicer that you realize, oh my God, what was the designer thinking? But before I completely go off the rails and talk about that, I want to start with the base here, because that's where I always try to start with all of my projects. And the reason why I do that is because I know me, and I know that the statue itself is the prize. And if I do the prize first, I'm going to kind of half-ass the base. So I try to knock out the bases first and then move on to the prize. This base on this model was particularly simple. There was really nothing to it. It's basically Kara standing on some clouds. So all I really had to do was fill the gaps between the two pieces, which I printed on my FDM printer, by the way, and prime it and paint it. But I'll be honest with you, I try to do these videos in chronological order, and all of the footage that you're seeing right now is not chronological order, because about halfway through the project, I realized I just wasn't happy with the base. The gap was still showing, and I wasn't happy with the color. So I readdressed the gap by adding more filler, sanded it some more, and then repainted it. Now you're probably seeing a new tool that I got during this project. We will address that a little later on too. But once I refilled it and resanded it and all that kind of stuff, I primed it with a gray primer and then sprayed it with white paint over the top, kind of like a zenithal. And that was it. The base was done. Yeah, the shadow areas are really dark, making it kind of look like a storm cloud, but that's okay, because if I want to be a dork, I can just say, hey, Kara's coming in, and she's like a thunderstorm. So stupid. All right, now it's time to move on to Kara, and this is where we have to address my issue with this model. And this is one of those things that is probably just overlooked by the designer. They didn't realize it until it was too late. I don't know. And the reason why I say that is because there's so much detail in this model that are just next level. It is amazing the amount of detail that they put into this. And there's little special Easter eggs on this that I've never seen other sculptors do, which I love. Like, all of the keys on this are little Superman logos, the crest of the House of El. I mean, that's really cool. That's a super neat little detail like that that gets completely covered up and nobody's ever going to see it, but that's okay, because I saw it. I appreciated that. But there is, like I've said a couple of times now, a flaw with this that just made it so much more difficult than it needed to be. And that flaw is they cut the head right in the center of the neck. Now, this wouldn't normally be a huge problem because you could just glue it up, fill the gap, paint the skin tones, and everybody'd be happy. The problem is you can't attach the head of this model until the cape is already attached. So in order to paint this properly, you need to basically paint the cape and the body, get that attached, and then attach the head, mask it off multiple different times, and then you can actually get a good result out of this. And oh, by the way, you can't paint the body until you attach the arms so that you can fill the gaps on the arms. And when you do that, you now have Ruthie's sword sticking straight up in the air, which is super thin and very fragile, that you have to deal with the entire time you're painting this, just praying that you don't break it. What a huge pain in the ass. LA3D e-sign, LA3D, whatever your name is. Man, I wish you would have considered painters when you made this sculpt. You're charging top dollar for this STL, and there's some bullshit like that with this head. I don't get it. I don't understand it, but I'm also not a sculptor. And so shame on me for being critical of someone that is capable of doing something that I'm not capable of doing. But listen, I paid good money for this. When there is a big flaw like that that makes it a huge pain in the ass, I feel warranted to be able to bitch about it. Anyway, end of that. Let's finally move on. So with all of the parts prepped and sanded and ready to go, I was ready to prime it, and I gave a new product a try for this primer, and that is Hobby Lobby's new paint line that they have. I went out there and bought a bunch of colors. They're really cheap, and they go through the airbrush pretty well. They're advertised as airbrush ready, but you have to thin them 1-to-1. That makes them not airbrush ready. But anyway, I used gray primer on it and it went down really well. It flattens out nice and seems to be holding up well. So, hey, it's a really good product to use in a pinch. I will always be a Vallejo guy. I love anything and everything that comes from Vallejo, but this is great. If you need something, you have a Hobby Lobby that's close by and you're like me, you don't have any other nerd stores within like 3 hours of you to go and just casually pick up stuff. This is a good buy. It's cheap. It works. It's fine. Now, as I said earlier, I had to paint the capes and the torsos prior to being able to put Kara's head on and address that gap and all of that other stuff. So I got to work on painting the capes first. And while I was painting the capes, I decided to throw Kryptos in there also because, well, they're both the exact same color. And to do that, I painted these the same way I paint all of my Superman capes. Now, you have to understand something about me. When I was 5 years old, I saw a god amongst men. And that god was Christopher Reeve. He was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen in my life, and I have been obsessed with Superman ever since then. And because of that, I have a rule in my model making, which is at least every 5th model that I do has to be a Kryptonian of some type. So I've done a lot of Superman capes, and the paints that I like to use to do this are very simple. It's a super simple technique. I prime everything in black, and then I come in with a white zenithal, I guess you could call it. I don't use fancy names, but that's what you call it. And then I use Createx red paint. Nothing fancy, just regular red. And it gives that kind of bright but deep red in the highlight areas, and then a darker, deep, rich red in the shadows. And it's always worked out really well for me. I love that Createx paint for Superman capes. It's the way I do it on every single one of them, and it just works out really well. So that's what I did, and guess what? It worked out really well. And again, Christopher Reeve, most beautiful man I've ever seen, and that's coming from a straight man. Now for the blue in Kara's suit, I started out with a deep sky blue from Vallejo, and this was almost perfect right out of the bottle. It looked really close to the comics, but I did want to brighten up the highlight areas, so I came in with just a regular sky blue from the top and highlighted all of that, and it looked really good. It looked very similar to the Christopher Reeve costume, which is pretty much what you see in the Woman of Tomorrow comic. So I was really happy with that, and then I started the first wave of masking. I masked off all of that blue, which was actually very easy because of her belt that goes right through through her midsection there. So I masked it off very quickly and then got started with painting the red on her boots and her skirt. Now you might be asking the question, after I just made such a big deal out of painting it black or priming it black and then doing a zenithal and then coming in with the Createx red, why did I not do that on the skirt and boots? And my answer to that is very simple. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't do that, because they are the same colors. It's not like her boots and skirt are brighter than the cape. I don't know why I didn't do that, but I didn't. So there it is. But once it was all dry, I came in with the Citadel Berserker Bloodshade and shaded the boots, skirt, and the cape. And they all looked the same. There's not a whole lot of shadows and highlights and stuff like that in the skirt and boots. So there's my justification for not doing the process that I did on the cape. I don't know. It all worked out. It all balanced out, and it looked really good when it was done. But then I realized I had made a huge mistake. I masked off that blue too early. It didn't have enough time to dry. I thought it was dry, but it wasn't. And so when I peeled the masking off, it did pull some of the paint off, like on her shoulders and on her boobs and all of the like pointy areas. And so I had to do the whole thing in reverse. I had to mask off the red once it was completely dry and redo the blue. Not a big deal. Stupid mistake. It's not one that I haven't made before. One of these days I'll learn. One last thing to do before I could glue the cape on and then attach the head. I wanted to paint Kara's belt because it would be hard to get in there with a paintbrush behind her, between her and the cape and all of that kind of stuff. So I painted that with a bronze from Monument Hobby. It might be a little darker than what it should be, but it goes on really well and it looks really good. So I'm happy with it. And then I could glue the cape on. But before I could continue on with this project, I got a surprise in the mail that actually wasn't a surprise at all, because I knew it was coming, but I didn't know it was coming that day. I received from Gallery their Mobius, which I find impossible not to call Morbius, 3.0 airbrush. They had heard me complain in a previous video about how I hated the airbrush that I had, and so they sent this along to me, and I am absolutely thrilled that they did that. I desperately needed a new airbrush. The junk that I was using before just wasn't cutting it anymore, and I'm really excited to get this and get it going. I'm not really going to do a formal review of it on this video, and if I'm being honest, I am under no obligation to talk about it whatsoever, because the deal I made with them was for my other channel where I 3D print and paint aquarium fish, but I thought I'd show it here because you're going to see it in the video, and I'm really happy with this airbrush so far. It's really, really good. And spoiler alert, stay tuned to future videos. It's not the only airbrush I received. Now back to painting Kara with the cape and the torso and all of that painted. I was able to attach the capes and then the heads. Then I could finally deal with that disgusting gap going right through the center of her neck. And I did that by filling it with resin and then using a little UV flashlight to cure that. And you know, I'm not somebody that is really here to educate you on anything. I don't necessarily think I'm qualified to do that. However, a situation like this is right up my alley, because I spent 17 years doing fine detail furniture repair work where I would rebuild carvings that dogs had chewed and things like that. And so this kind of detail work is perfect for me. And there's a little trick that I'd like to give you that can definitely help if you find yourself in a situation like this. If you have a very small part, like this ridiculously small neck that has a cut going right through the center, and you want to repair that and make that completely invisible, fill that area with resin, cure it with your UV flashlight, and then cover the entire neck or the entire piece that you're working on with resin. Now, if you're doing this in the middle of a giant torso, that's not really going to work out. But if it's a really small area like this, I took that liquid resin and I painted it throughout the entire neck area to blend it all in and give it all the same exact texture. And it made that completely disappear. So just a little tip for you. If you got a small part, fill it with resin, then coat the entire thing with resin or whatever your filler of choice is. Get it to blend in, make that thing disappear. It's a shame that I had to go that far with this model, but if I didn't, it was going to look ridiculous. So I'm glad I did. Now it's time for the skin tones, except it's actually not. I had to mask off everything except for the head and the hands in order to paint the skin tones. And I did make sure that everything was good and dry first. I think I let everything sit for like 24 hours before I masked it off. But I masked everything off. It took a while, but it was worth it. Then I could get started with the skin tones. And this was my first experience using the gray Kaleido primer. They asked me what color I wanted. I specifically asked for gray primer, and I love this stuff. Straight out of the bottle, goes through the airbrush like a dream. I am going to be ordering the black. I'm going to be ordering white. I'm going to order all the primers from Kaleido. Their paints are really nice too, but the primer went on really well, and then I start with my skin tone formula. And I want to be very clear. This is not my formula as if it's something that I invented. All I'm saying is I have worked with a bunch of different colors to find the right colors and sequence to get the skin tones the way I want them. And on this model, I found my formula, and I've used the same formula on skin tones ever since. And I've been really, really happy with the results. It's not like I'm some kind of pioneer. I didn't mix these colors on my own. These are straight out of the bottle, but it's the formula that I use. And if you like the way my skin tones look, then you can use this too. But it starts off with red violet from Vallejo. I don't only spray that from the top. I cover everything in the red violet. And then I follow that up with brown rose, paying most attention to the upward facing areas, but I do hit the shadow areas too, just not as much. I focus more on the top, and then I follow that up with Monument Hobbies Warm Flesh. And this is where I'm starting to mainly focus on the upward facing areas. And then after that, I come in and just hit the tippy top of the upward facing areas with Basic Skin Tone from Vallejo. And all of these paints are diluted 50-50 with water, by the way. I forgot to mention that earlier. That is important. So they are very, very thin. And after the basic skin tone, I go to the newest color in my arsenal, which is the real Orcish Dermis. And let me just answer the question. Is Orcish Dermis worth all the hype? Is it the magic trick that Ground Affected and Shelf Candy says it is? Yes, it absolutely is. It is 100% worth the hype. I've been using it ever since this model. This was my first time actually using the real Orcish Dermis. I had mixed up my own in the past and it didn't really work out all that well, but I used the real thing here and I'm super excited about it. I know Orcish Dermis is very difficult to find, but I'll tell you how I did it. I ordered it directly from Scale 75 and I ordered 10 bottles of it. Now that might sound extreme, but to me, I couldn't justify spending $23 to ship one $3 bottle of paint from Spain to North Carolina. That just seemed ridiculous to me. So I ordered 10. The shipping cost the exact same amount of money, and I ended up getting the Orcish Dermis for about $5.40 a bottle. Now, I'll tell you, that is still pretty expensive, but when I think about how I go to the nerd store and I spend about $7 a bottle for contrast paints and shades from Citadel, I think it's a pretty good deal. And again, just like Ground Affected says, just like Shelf Candy says, this stuff is like magic. It is worth the hype. If you can find it, get it. I love it. But the skin tones aren't done after Orcish Dermis. I come back in with Monument Hobbies tan flesh, and this one is the one that brings it all together. The Orcus dermis with this brings everything together, and it just gives it that really rich skin tone color for me. You might not like these skin tones, but I like them. They work well for me. Like I said, I've been using this exact formula ever since, and I've been delighted with the results that I get. Once everything is dry, I then spray all of the skin tones with Vallejo satin top coat, and my skin tones are done. Now it's time to paint her hair, and this is when I discovered that painting blonde hair really sucks, or I just really suck at it. I've seen many videos of people painting blonde hair, particularly ground affected, on multiple Supergirl models that he's done, and it looks so easy. But that is the sign of somebody that is very good at what they do. They make everything they do look very easy. Painting blonde hair is not easy. I tried starting out with a color that I mixed up, putting it on with a brush. It's just a very pale blonde. And then I did what I've seen ground affected do, which is follow that up with Skeleton Horde from Citadel. But the difference is when he does that, he does it with an airbrush. I did it with a brush, and it was just too much. It really made the hair look like mustard shit. I mean, it was really bad. So I ended up masking everything off and then taking that pale blonde color that I had mixed up, pale yellow color, and spraying the entire hair with that. Then followed it up with a dry brushing of deck tan, and that brought it home. It was satisfactory. I was happy with the results. It wasn't easy getting there, but I got there. And I just, I can't necessarily give you advice on how to paint blonde hair. If you want to know how to paint blonde hair, go watch Ground Affected paint Supergirl, because that dude knows how to do it. Me, I just bullshitted my way through it, and here we are. I like the results. My nephew liked the results. That's all that mattered. Oh, we are getting so close to these being done. It's time to paint the face. I started off with the eyebrows, which I used Agros Dunes. I guess that's how you say it, from Citadel. The eyebrows need to be a little bit darker than the hair, so that worked out fine. And then for the lips, this is a really interesting color choice by the artists who did the Woman of Tomorrow book. It's a very weird color for her lips. It's like a black, but it also has a slight hint of red and maybe even a tad bit of gray in it. I don't even know how to describe the color. So I just mixed up something on my own. I'm pretty sure I mixed up those three colors, gray, black, and red, came up with a weird color for the lips and used that. And then it was time to move on to my favorite thing to do, which is paint eyes. I'm not saying I'm great at it. I just really love doing it. And on this particular model, the eyes are nice and big, which makes our life so much easier. I started off with painting the eyelashes black. Those are all sculpted in, which is very nice. And then I painted the eyeballs, the white parts of the eyeballs, with deck tan, which a lot of people might think is too dark, but I've been using that on eyeballs for a while, and it works out really well for me. And then when it comes to the irises, I did it the same way I do all Kryptonians that I paint, which is starting off with deep Prussian blue for the overall shape of the iris, and then I follow that up with 3 different shades of blue, all from Vallejo. First is magic blue, and then deep sky blue, and then sky blue, and I'm just basically building it up. I'm painting like a little horseshoe down on the bottom of the iris, and as the colors get brighter, I'm adding less and less, just tiny amounts of this blue color to make the eyes really pop. Kryptonian's eyes have to pop from across the room, and this has worked out really well for me. Once all of that is dry, then I add a pupil with black. I add the specular highlights because that's what Ground Affected said you're supposed to do, and he's right, because it looks absolutely beautiful. It changes the game when you add those. Then I coat it with gloss from Army Painter, because that's the only gloss the nerd store had when I went there, and the eyes are done. now it's time to paint the 2 crests of the House of El. I'm a total dork. That's what I call them. You can call it the S symbol. You can call it Superman logo. Call them whatever you want to call them. I don't particularly care, but I'm a dork, and I like to call them the crest of the House of El. I started off with deck tan and then followed that up with the yellow. The entire back crest is covered in yellow, and then obviously just the center of the one on her chest. Then I followed it up with the same Createx red for the trim of the chest. This is not a good paint to paint with a brush. It's meant for airbrushes, but I did want the colors to match up perfectly, and it flows really nice, so it wasn't a really bad experience, but had to be careful with it because it is very, very thin. Oh, and I also painted her underwear. You pervert. You thought I was going to forget about Krypto the super dog. Of course I'm not. He is a vital part of this whole thing. Maybe not as much as in the movie because, spoiler alert, in the comics, he is under no threat of death whatsoever. Kara actually made that up to give her a good excuse to travel with Ruthie. But anyway, Krypto was super easy. I painted him with Kaleido white, and then on the underside of him, I sprayed a little bit of deck tan, and that was pretty much it. And then I moved on to his face. I painted his mouth, the inside of his mouth, with Orcish dermis, and then painted his teeth with deck tan, painted the little line for his lips with black gray, and then his nose, and then for his eyes, it was very simple. I've painted a few Krypto eyes before, and I basically use, for the iris, I use black, and then I use like a bronze color, because I don't know, it seems like all dogs except for huskies have like a coppery brown colored eye, and then a black pupil, specular highlight, the whole thing. But I did also give him a little bit of black gray eyeliner because it looked like that in the comics. I painted the inside of his ears with gray, and then the collar I painted with a gold color, and then the little studs on it I painted silver. I mean, Krypto was really easy on this model. He's adorable, he's cute, he's very important to the story, but he was super easy to paint. And I don't know why, but my camera was out of focus pretty much the entire time while I was painting Krypto. I apologize about that, but I'm happy with the way he turned out. All right, we are rounding third and heading home. Like my boys, the Washington Nationals, have been doing a lot lately, but we got to put the final details on Ruthie's sword here. This was another thing that was super easy. I painted the handle with gunmetal for some reason. I don't really know why. It looked good though. And then for the blade itself, I just used a silver from Testers. It's a silver that I've used a million times. I've used it on this channel already. It's always worked out well for me. And I've had this teeny itty bitty bottle for like 6 years. And I don't feel like I've used any of it. I don't know. It's just really weird. But whenever I need something that's going to be a bright metallic silver, I always go to that. And it works out really well. And once this was done, it was just a matter of gluing her up. And 2 Kara Zor-El, Woman of Tomorrow comic book cover models are done, and one of them ready to be delivered to my nephew. You know, I've given the designers of this model a lot of crap throughout this video because of the whole cut in the neck thing, and I want to take this opportunity to take all of that back. That was an overreaction. Yeah, it did make painting the model a little bit of a pain in the ass, but overall, this project was a ton of fun to do, and they deserve credit for creating an absolutely stunning model and a perfect representation of the cover of Woman of Tomorrow. In fact, my nephew, when he got home, sent me this photo, which was him holding his copy of Woman of Tomorrow right next to his model and saying, "Hey, look how accurate this is." He was absolutely thrilled with his model. So that took all of that pain of painting this thing away. And again, overall, it was an absolute delight to do this. I did enjoy it. And LA 3D designs. I know you don't have a lot of designs out there, at least not on CG Trader, but I just do want to say you did do a great job on this. Just don't put cuts in the necks. That's just dumb. Thank you so much for watching this video and hanging out with me for the last 30 minutes. It really has been a lot of fun to do. And on the next video, we're going to be painting a crazy, hot, and sexy cat lady that you have seen on this website before. It really should be a lot of fun. But anyway, that's it. Thanks again for watching. So long now.